Awesome, Isaac. Well, I guess without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are and who you serve?
Sure. So my name is Sir Isaac Smith. It is something that we're working on making official. But I am a jack of many trades. Primarily, I am a podcast producer. I specialize in helping business owners, thought leaders, and coaches establish their expertise and connect with their target audience and give them opportunities for networking and growing their business through podcasting. That is why I love this field. It is not a matter of who's the next Joe Rogan. It's a matter of how do you meet Joe Rogan through what you do. Apart from that, I am a husband, aspiring father. That's something that we're going to be hopefully working on here in the next few years. And I do a few other things. I have my own podcast, The Business RPG, which you graciously came on and we had an amazing conversation about what you do in your business. And also, I run a reselling operation. That's one of the other things that I
Nice.
love to do, and one of the things that puts bread on the table. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. I like that how you said you're kind of a jack of all trades because clearly, based on that resume, you definitely are. One thing that I wanted to touch on is, like you said, you help people improve their content game via like more long form stuff. And I've noticed this, and I'm probably sure you have as well, that as a business owner slash content creator slash influencer, if you want to go that far, I've noticed that over the last 2, 3 years, there's been ever present but kind of slow shift from short form to long form
Yes.
because it helps really warm up your audience. And I think we talked about this on your podcast, so this might be redundant for our loyal fans out there. But this, when you have a 10-minute like YouTube video on my top 5 favorite low calorie snacks to help and binge eating, that 10-minute video will warm you up faster than watching 10 highly edited reels, right? And so I've noticed that a lot of the business gurus in the space, if you will, are starting to create more of a pillar of long form rather than you need to hammer everything on Instagram and then everything else is kind of secondary. They're almost kind of seeing it as get them from Instagram, send them to YouTube, and warm them up as fast as possible because everybody kind of has like their own timer on how much content of yours they need to see or watch before they're like ready to take it to the next step. So I guess that was a very long-winded way of me asking, how do you feel about that? It sounds like that resonates with you, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so I will say this up front. You can find a study that will tell you anything you want to find. And for the past couple years, me and my other colleagues, or at least colleagues at the time, I think they've kind of gone separate ways with their businesses. But other producers that I was networking with, and we'd share data, studies, look up content together, and look at how the market was changing, we found a lot of conflicting data. I'll share what I found and the direction I think it's going. I just want to put that caveat in there because someone's going to get in there and say that I'm wrong. And that's fine. Maybe I am. But I've found a couple things where it was happening over the course of, I want to say, the past 6 years, because the data started in 2019 and we were looking at it over the following years. Long form content was growing and I think is still growing. Joe Rogan has cornered the market. Yeah, but it's not just that it's Joe Rogan who cornered the market. It's that audiences are getting younger. Audiences that are younger are growing, and the audiences are pursuing this longer form content. But the idea before was you make a 20-minute podcast because the average American's commute to work was 24, 25 minutes. So that's
Nice.
what
Okay.
a lot of people were thinking you do. Turns out that's not the case. It turns out that they pick up where they left off on that Joe Rogan episode, on that whatever insert name of podcast here, or that D&D podcast that it's a long form. That's how you have to record those shows, and people would come back and pick up where they left off. At the same time, though, what I see is all these video platforms, content platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn even, are doubling down on the short form. And so I'm seeing kind of this conflict of interest here in the field right now because everyone wants to go the short form route, but when it comes to an audience's actual value, You determine that based off of the retention rate on the long form content. So I see a big push in long form. I think that makes the most sense to double down on. It's just like writing a book, though. You have to find a way to drive audiences to it and to establish value in that sort of content. I'll give you kind of a Easter egg or whatever you want to call it. One solution that we've found in our business is to marry the two together. I have a client who is the number one thought leader I think you could say it's within the United States, although he has a lot of audience members that are outside the US. Thought leader in corporate bankruptcy. He is the go-to chief restructuring officer when it comes to those kinds of Chapter 11, Chapter 7. Now, that's really boring. That's not a sexy topic. But we found that no one else was really making content in this space. So when people were looking for content, when they were looking for education, when they were looking for, oh, hey, my company is going over, do I need to file for bankruptcy? The only people who had content out there was him. Now, the way we've leveraged that, though, is instead of going just the full-on short form route where we have 10 shorts that we've made out of that 45-minute interview, we've taken an 8 to 15-minute clip out of that long-form interview that answers one question, maybe two, but usually just one question. And we get really specific on that because we know that people aren't just going to be typing in, do I need to file for bankruptcy? They need to type in MCA loan. Do I need to take out an MCA loan? Sorry, I'm getting really highbrow, but I'm going somewhere with this. The end result is I can take that shorter form video, capture someone's 10 minutes when they're not willing to spend the full 45, answer that one primary question that they probably would have had going into that big interview. And not only have I captured them as a potential audience member, but I've diverted traffic, I would say more successfully, to the longer form versus what I see happen with shorts. So there's a lot of conflicting data. There's a lot of different audiences and how they're behaving. But that just means that there's a lot of ways that you can capture your target audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, and this is my N equals 1 test here, so my data might be a little skewed, but I've noticed if I do like a long form podcast like this and then try to splice that into short form, 30, 60, 90 bits, that the performance is like very piss poor on like if I post on Instagram or TikTok versus if I make something that is supposed to be short form. If I do like something with like a voiceover or something like that. So I think that not only the algorithm, but also people's attention, they know if they see, the two images stacked on top, or the two windows stacked on top of each other, they're like, all right, this is probably a splice of a long form piece. I don't want to watch that right now. But taking it from an hour long video to like an 8-minute video, like you were saying, and then having the link in the description, because you're probably already on YouTube anyway, I feel like that's a much easier step than trying to shoehorn long form content into a short form window is kind of what I've noticed.
Same here.
Nice. So we talked about this just before we hit the record button, but you said your bread and butter is helping people get started. How do you do that?
I think I said right before we started is we help people who don't know where to start. And what I've found is a lot of clients, including corporate clients, they just don't have time. They don't want to know how to start. They just want to be able to sit down and press record. And that really quickly became our value proposition. It wasn't just that, oh yeah, we help you find opportunities to network through podcasting and you'll be established in your field because no one else has a podcast in your field. All that's true. All that can be true. All that might be true for you. But the real reality of it is we save people time. If I'm doing my job right, then a client just has to come into maybe in person or a virtual studio like this, like we're using Riverside. Shout out to Riverside, by the way. Using this kind of space where they can just come in, press record, say their piece, and then be able to walk away and not have to look at it again until it's time to publish. And that's the end goal as far as our packages, as far as what we do and if we're doing our job right. But you asked about getting started. It's a process of auditing your knowledge base, your ability to create content. Like I have an exercise with people I do. The original exercise was sit down and give me 90 topics that you could talk about intelligently for content, for podcast episodes. And if they weren't comfortable with doing that, then I would tell them, you're not ready for a podcast. I'd just be taking your money. I'm not going to do that to you. Now I've shortened it to 40 because that's much less daunting, but I found that if people can do 40, they can do 90. So when they take that exercise and they come back, I just ask them to, okay, you did it, show me the top 10, explain to me why these top 10 are the most important, just niching it down a little bit further to where, okay, they can speak intelligently about these topics. They can create these different types of content. My job then becomes, at that point as a coach, identifying the best medium to put these topics or these ideas into. If it's a podcast episode, if maybe this would do better as a short or a reel or one of your Instagram posts. So it'd be better if you got with your Instagram VA and worked on that and do that with your process versus spending the full 30 or 90 minutes on a podcast episode. So it's finding where they're at with their content, identifying their target audience, and then getting them to the point to where we're not going to be bottlenecked for content ideas. We're going to be focused on perfecting the process of recording. And then after that, it's just a matter of getting into the process of repurposing, being on time. That's one of the biggest things you can do with a podcast is I'll work with someone who's doing really, really well, and they'll miss one of their release dates, and that episode will get half the traffic that it did before. And it's simply because they
Wow.
missed that one spot. That's I don't know if I answered your question super well there, but getting started is really a matter of auditing yourself and then finding the tech, finding the technology and establishing the process and becoming a podcaster before you worry about growth, before you worry about those big metrics. Getting started looks like staying at zero for a little while on the metric side, but having your process down, having your ideas mapped out, having the ability to create the content, because you have to crawl before you can walk. And tummy time is one of those steps too. It takes a while to get up to where you can actually crawl. And that's an expectation I have to set with some of our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure the old adage everyone has heard of, your first 100 are going to suck, right? Your first 100 reels, your first 100
Yeah.
episodes. And the good thing with crappy content is nobody sees it. So nobody knows it has crappy content. And so that's how you have people who have been overnight successes, just 5 years in the making. It's because nobody saw their previous content because it never kicked off until that one video. Then everyone kind of goes through their backlog. And it's definitely something that I had to come to terms with, to where it's like that perfectionist mindset, where it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to make this post. It's just, it's like 85% complete, or it's like an 85%, like I'd grade it like a B plus. And it's like, you know what? Screw it. Just send it. If it sucks, it sucks. No one's gonna know, right? And so that's the best thing about it. One thing that I thought of when I was first early on starting my brand and my business, it was just there's so many different hats that an entrepreneur has to wear. And I was just like, I want to find somebody that can just essentially just take that entire mental load off of me and just not even, like you said, without not even do the self audit, where it's just like, you just tell me what to make, put me in front of a camera, I'll make it, and then you do the rest. What do you say to somebody who doesn't even want to do that initial self audit or even kind of go through that whole market research to come up with content? Because I definitely fell into that camp like 2 years ago.
I get those. I get those from time to time. The nice thing is a lot of those people, in my experience, don't want to think about it because they've already been thinking about it too long. And they already have a lot of it flushed out. I have one client who's extremely organized. By the time he came to me, he already had articles written, he had everything ready, and that's really great. But there is a threshold. I'll call it a litmus test of the amount of work I have to see that you're willing to put into it before we can really take you on as a client. And I'm not saying you can't have a podcast. What I'm saying is your podcast might need to be something that you need to reconsider as far as having a producer for it. Maybe this is something that you just need to release on your own time when you can, where you can. And that just looks like getting familiar with the Riverside Suite or another editing software and cutting as many corners as you can to where the quality might not be there, but the value that you're putting out is, and you just get really good at putting it out. So for people who don't even want to go through the exercises, I guess I have to audit them in a different way, understanding why maybe they don't. Let's say it's a big corporate company and I have so many corporate clients. But let's say that it is a corporate situation where the marketing department gets in touch with you and they're like, hey, we needed this yesterday. We're ready to start. We have a studio that we're renting. We have all this stuff. That's great. I at least need to go through the basics of where are we at? Where are we going? Why are you doing this? What is it that you want to see? Because if it ends up being an end result that I can't deliver on without you doing ABC, I'm going to tell you I need ABC or I can't be your guy. And I'm not going to set you up for failure just to have that come back and reflect on me. Call me when you're ready or let me know when you want to sit down and go through a couple of these processes.
Yeah. I like that a lot because there's a few things in there that I actually do with my prospective clients. We do what's called a 2-call close. And essentially the first call is a 15-minute vibe check. Really, it's just so that way I can kind of get a better understanding of like where they are in the current moment, what their goal is, like you said, get an idea on what their end result is, their ideal end result is, and then kind of just get a general vibe for people. And then between that, or then we'll do like a 45 to 60-minute call where we kind of really sink our teeth into everything and really lay out what a program is and everything like that. But between those 2 calls, I assign homework. I'll send them like a quick 10-minute video that I made, just kind of broad strokes, creating a program. And then I always assign them some form of self-care. So if somebody who isn't even doing anything to improve their health and they're really just kind of waiting to work with a professional to get started, I'll have them do just like literally anything in the form of movement, in the form of self-care. And so it's like 1 minute of stretching, 10 minutes of walking, a 30-minute body weight workout. I literally don't care what it is. I just want them to get up and start moving between then and our next call. And the reason why I do that is because I want them to start planting the seed of prioritizing themselves. It's like setting aside time to prioritize their health. But I also want to see if they're going to be compliant. Because if I can't get you to watch, a 9-minute video and then maybe do some stretching while watching it, then how the heck am I going to be able to help walk you through an actual workout program? And so there's that compliance test, like you were talking about. If you can't come up with 40 ideas of things that you can talk about, then maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And to kind of go a side tangent, I really liked how you talked about how you probably have already been thinking about it. You got all these maybe short form posts, you have already these articles you have written, you have all this other stuff that can be recycled into content. Because one thing that I thought of is when I first started off was if I made this post, oh, we can never touch that topic again. When in reality, you can just keep hammering that topic home. You can turn it into a Twitter card, you can turn it into a carousel, you can turn it into a talking head, you can turn it into a B-roll, you can then turn that into more long form. It's like there's so much that you can do with just the same topic, and you can fit kind of any medium as long as it kind of is made natively for that medium, like we talked about earlier.
And just to piggyback off of that, I had a client who we sat down to figure out just how many ways we could repurpose their podcast. I think we got to, it was either 9 or 11 different ways that we had mapped out we were going to repurpose each episode. And now some of those were duplicates, like we might make a highlight clip, I call it, where it's the 8 to 15 minute clip, and then a short, and the short happens to line up with the same spot. So, we are using the same content over and over, but that's where some of the value is. You come over and listen to the Business RPG, and you're going to hear a lot of the same stories over and over and over from different people. But that's simply because starting sometimes looks like ground zero might look different for each person, but there's a lot of things in common that let you identify it's ground zero. And so that lines up across a lot of, and that's where the value is. That's where the value is for me doing the show. It's where the value is for people who are also starting.
Yeah, and this, I think this might be a bit of a cliche, but they say it takes 21 touch points to actually start something. And so it's like you need to hear the same story and over and over and over and over and over again before it actually resonates with you. So especially if you hear that similar or same story from different guests, or if you're like me, I'll listen to pretty much anything Alex Hormozi puts out. So I hear the same story over and over again. And it just kind of helps reinforce that mindset, or helps keep you motivated to let you know, what, I am on the right path because these 3 people started off on the same thing, the same journey as I did. So it's good to see that people that were at the same starting point are, this successful.
Right on.
Nice. I'm going to throw a curveball at you. What do you say to people that say podcasting is dead?
Okay. You just opened up, yeah. So I have one client who regularly will get on and say, "Hey, podcasting is dying." So our next episode, I'm like, okay, we need to talk about this. I disagree, and here's why. Two main points I'll give you. One is we haven't seen podcasting quite hit that mass adoption phase yet. We're at a point I like to tell people where podcasting is a household term, but it's not a household tool. You still have a number of people who don't touch podcasting. You have a number of people who get their content from YouTube videos where it's not a podcast. It's just, a 10-minute how do I jumpstart a car kind of video, which those are valuable and there's a place for them. I used them the other day when I was changing my tire. They are very important. But we're not at that point where everyone is using this in the same context as where everyone is using YouTube, everyone is using Facebook, or I guess now it's TikTok, or everyone is using whatever tool it is to better themselves. So I think we're almost there, but I believe podcasting is still in its mid, maybe even late adolescence as far as where it's going. COVID was a giant catapult that made, I think we went from 40 million to 80 million in like 2018. Don't cite me on that, but we doubled whatever year that was, the first year of the lockdowns. We doubled as far as existing podcast and podcast consumption. Podcasts, as of the end of last year, I believe there were 900 million podcasts in existence, according to Blueberry or Libsyn, one of the two. 90+% of those shows had not uploaded an episode in the past 365 days.
Okay.
So when you say podcasting is dead, is it because people aren't listening to podcasts, or is it because people aren't consistently uploading and creating new content for those audiences to tap into? You have to be very, very clear as to what you mean by dead. Is it that it just isn't working for you? Or is it that you haven't given it a fair shake, so no wonder your show is dead? No wonder people haven't shown up. It is a marathon. And I mean, it's a marathon of marathons. It's not a sprint. So that's one. Two is that I am a huge subscriber to the idea of content-based networking. There's a gentleman who actually wrote a book by that title. He is the CEO of a podcast production company called Sweetfish, and he documents in that book how he built his own production business, his own podcast production business, through the power of content-based networking. This is where me and Jordan get on a podcast, and when the podcast is over, me and Jordan have developed such a connection that at the end of it, we start talking about what we do. Well, odds are Jordan is going to hear me talk about either the fact I need some help when it comes to physical fitness, or that I know someone who is in need of help with physical fitness. So Jordan's response is, "Hey, well, this is what I do. Here's my value proposition. Would you like me to send you a proposal?" I get that proposal, and maybe I say no. Reality is majority of the proposals we send out don't go to contract. But how many of those interviews does Jordan need to do to where he sends out X number of proposals to where he knows his ratio as to how many are going to be a yes? Once you have that math figured out, essentially you've hacked how your podcast is going to work for your company. And so the more people who double down on the idea of content-based networking, in my opinion, are going to find that interview style content is the best way to do this. The more people who do that, they're going to realize podcasting is the way to go. So it doesn't become a matter of I need thousands of people to consume my content. It comes down to the fact I need a few hundred of quality people, and that takes time to do too. But I'll take a couple of hundred quality listeners versus 10,000 people who are just clicking, going through recreationally, along with all those connections I make along the way, because that's how my business grows. That's how my production business, I've landed multiple clients that way. And it's not that I went in expecting to land a client each time. I went in expecting to hear a story and learn a lot. But I work with entrepreneurs. That's my client base. My podcast is with entrepreneurs. There's a lot of overlap there and a lot of opportunity. So if I do this correctly, podcasting is not going to die anytime soon, simply because I've learned how to leverage it. So again, you have to define, is it dead because I don't have the Joe Rogan numbers yet, or is it dead because I'm not figuring out how to meet people through creating content? So that's the short version of my response to that question. Yeah.
So 100%. And I could definitely see myself falling into that latter camp to where it's like I post like once I post an episode like maybe once every 3 months. Like I actually filmed like I think 4 or 5 episodes in January, and then I published one in March, like one in April, and then like I think maybe one in May, and then I've posted like five this month. It's just because it's like I filmed them, they kind of got thrown in the backlog, and they're not like there's a lot of other priorities, right? So it's like, well, I'm not seeing the results, and like we talked about before, that's not why I'm doing podcasts. I just want to celebrate people's victories and get better at long form speaking. And so this is a good way to kind of do that. But I really like that what you were talking about because when you first said it, I thought it was just going to be more of like, what they call it, user generated content to where I make this podcast with you. You and I collaborate on it. You post it on your socials. I post it on mine. We cross pollinate networks and we kind of help each other grow that way, which is a good side effect, I guess, if you will, of a podcast like this, where we're having a good interview style. But also it's networking that like 100%. I've picked up at least one or two clients from doing podcasts, either being a guest or being a host. And you're right. I now know the one and only Sir Isaac Smith. So essentially, I am like part of his network. Who does he know that would fit my ideal client avatar, and who do I know that would fit his ideal client avatar? And so it's like we're building this network. I like to say we're building an empire, and it's great because we're going to sit here and chat for an hour that we already have in the past on your podcast, and so we were developing a really good rapport rather than exchanging a few texts via Instagram or something like that.
I remember at the end of our podcast on my show, you asked me a really cool question off camera at the very end because we were just talking a little bit, and you asked me, I think it was, who are one or two people in your network that I need to know? And who is it that I can introduce you to that I might know? And that is a huge gift. That's a huge blessing. It's not, in my opinion, it's manipulative or backhanded or anything. It's, hey, if I've provided value for you, is there anyone you know that I can provide that same value to? It's what I know a lot of people tell themselves when they're getting into sales and they hate sales. I hate sales, but it's a matter of I'm solving a problem and I genuinely want those people with that problem to have it solved. And that's a huge part of growing your business. It's the endorsements that you get from people who know, like, and trust you, who have people that they know, like, and trust, who can't find someone that they know, like, and trust to solve X problem. Yeah, it is a huge, I keep saying huge, but it's a very important pivotal part of any business when a business owner is honest with themselves.
And it's not exactly like when I ask that, it's like who are two clients that you can bring to me and who's somebody that I can bring on to enroll you as a client, or that you can enroll as a client. It's who do I think would be a good contact from you, either to be like an episode, like a guest on your podcast, or maybe you guys have similar niches or a similar like business structure, stuff like that. And it's just who can we connect each other with to help just expand this spiderweb empire
Exactly.
that we're building. And yeah, I mean, because they say if you can get one client to refer to, you're printing money. But I think the same thing goes with just like networking in general, right? Because if I can give you somebody who would be a guest on your pod and they can send you two people, and it's not necessarily you're not exchanging money, but you're building the brand, building the network and everything like that. It just helps it just helps like in the long run. It helps everybody. And it's something that's like mutually beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't happen every time. And that's okay.
Right,
that is
yeah.
completely okay, because at the end of it, you still have a contact. You still have someone who's going to be an advocate, kind of like you mentioned earlier. Your biggest growth happens not when your guest shares that reel on their own Instagram feed. Your biggest growth happens when that guest becomes a fan of the show. They listen to all the episodes. They play it in their workspace. They share it with a friend. And all of a sudden, people are organically finding a show. You just happen to introduce it to them, in a first person rather than a third person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So on that note, how do you leverage long form podcasting to help somebody either build a brand, build their business, promote a product? How do you use that as like a main piece to the puzzle?
There's a number of approaches to take to that, and I'm going to give you the big picture answer because if I get too down into the weeds, we'll be here for a while, and I know that about myself. I can really get into the weeds of it. You have the audience that you're targeting, and then it becomes a matter of, am I here to entertain, am I here to inspire, or am I here to educate? And whichever one of those three that you go with will determine how you're going to leverage your podcast and where it needs to show up. Comedians, anyone listening to their show, it's going to be great. For education, you get pretty specific with who you have on, with where you want it to appear, with how you promote it. And then inspiration, for me, that's kind of the hybrid between the two, because you have a niche that you're inspiring, but at the same time, you want to be open to anyone that's coming in to be affected by your content. Some people put inspiration and education in the same vertical. I do not. I think that those are very different types of audiences that receive content very differently. But I'll give you a bit more of a specific example. I have one client who he is at the stage where he is selling his company. Very cool story. He's not selling it the usual way. He's selling it to the employees. Giant company in the state of Texas. Majority of the employees own a majority share of the equity. And the ones who don't are contractors like me who are just there for a little while. I'm not a W-2, I'm a 1099. He wanted to document how he built the business, and he wanted to document the thought process, the principles, everything that went into it so that those employees would know exactly how he did it, exactly why the company is succeeding the way that it is, and also for anyone else who he could mentor to get that kind of time studying at his feet. It's not a conceited thing. I think mainly I say that because of the number of people who were telling him to create this podcast before he finally decided to do it. You know, that's more of a sign of humility. But for him, the win was simply having it available to the rest of the company to grow and anyone outside who would benefit from how he did it. If his goal was to become the next Joe Rogan, we would have promoted that show differently. We would have recorded that show differently. We would have distributed it differently. So part of it comes down to your goals and where you want to go. And if your goal needs to be achieved without a podcast, it means that you don't need a podcast. I feel like that's the best way for me to answer that question without giving away too much of the secret sauce. But also, it does depend. I hate that kind of answer, but it does genuinely depend on the show.
Sure. So it's kind of like figuring out what what's that goal, what's that dream outcome you want of the podcast, and then kind of great baby steps to work towards it.
Yeah, I will tell you this. Main reasons that you have a podcast are to establish your expertise. It's to connect with a target audience in a much easier format. And it is to connect with the people who are going to have the opportunities for your business to grow, be it a client, strategic partner. And there are other reasons to have a podcast. Sure, if you want to be a sponsor or have a sponsor, if you want to promote a book, sure, yada, yada, yada. But those are the main three that I find work and are very achievable early on. And the short form version of how you leverage a long form content to grow goes back to the conversation we already had. It's the relationships you make along the way. Eventually, when you've been doing it for X amount of time and you have that brand recognition, then it's a completely different strategy than when I just need to meet the next person who's going to propel my business forward and I'm going to propel their business forward.
Yeah, like everybody that goes on Joe Rogan, everybody's clawing to make it happen because they know that they're going to have a huge catapult in their publicity/notoriety, depending on how you look at it.
Yep. Everyone's wanting to play on Twitch with Tim the Tatman because as soon as they do, I know one gentleman was able to play with them, and that one time or that one shout out built his Twitch career that he lives off of. And that's the magic of having that kind of brand recognition being that big. It just takes time to get there. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do a podcast, and it doesn't mean that you can't expect immediate results. It just means that you've grown X amount, which means you need to strategize a bit different for your show.
Yeah. I like streaming, and I want to talk about Twitch here in a second. But kind of going off of that, Asmongold, he watched a video by a very, very, very small content creator. Her name was Background NPC, I believe. And he watched like it might have been like the very first video she made or like the fourth video she made, but she had less than 100 subscribers. And no, sorry, she had 300 subscribers. And he's like, wow, man, wow, chat, she had a really, this is a really good video. Give her some love. He refreshed the page. She had 1,000, like 1.3 thousand. Refreshed 3.3 thousand. By the end of that video, I went to her page, she had over 30,000. By the next day, she had over 100,000 subscribers, all because Asmongold just promoted her. And she provided quality content. Like it wasn't just like she was like a slop streamer or anything like that. She provided really good insight into what she was talking about. Her voice was very easy to listen to because apparently she was like a an amateur voice actor. So like she had a very like soft tone. She had like the very Twitch purple lighting like I do, and like everything was just kind of easy to consume, both like visually, auditorially, audioly, if that's a word, and everything like that. And so she created good content, and then Asmon just completely blew her up. And so it's like some one promotion like that was enough to go from 300 subscribers to over 100,000. You're right. It's all about having that network, and that was something that you are your brand was something that took me about 3 years to really learn because my Instagram handle back in 21, I dabbled in online coaching for like a very brief minute, and my Instagram handle is Phoenix Performance Coaching. And I had that up until 6 months ago, 7 months ago, to where it's like all my business mentors are like, you need to change your name. It needs to be your name. You are your brand. And I'm like, no, I want Phoenix Performance Coaching to be bigger than me. And they're like, that's not how brands work anymore. It's not like you're Nike or Tide. You know what I mean? It's like you are you. People sign up to work with you. And so after about 3 years of that, I was like, you know what? These guys might be onto something. And so I changed my name, and my Instagram has grown not exponentially, but significantly since. So maybe there's some validity to that.
I've heard similar things when it comes to like your thumbnails and when it comes to promo pictures for an episode or for content. One of my clients is a big MCO. He's a chief marketing officer by trade, and he's done it for several companies. And he said on a call one time, we were all talking about how we were going to promote this show, and he goes, "We need faces. We don't need all this branding, copy, and all these other items. Like they're important, sure, but audiences, what is it? Resonate. Thank you. Audiences resonate much stronger when there is a face connected to whatever the content is." And I've noticed similar changes because after I heard that, we started changing a lot of how we do thumbnails, about how we would present posts, and it resonated. It had a much bigger effect, and we saw comments go up, we saw likes go up, simply because, like what you said, we allowed the people to be their brand. I struggle with that. I'll say this just because I'm a business nerd. I struggle with that because I try to view a business as an asset. And an asset is something that you can sell to someone else and they can continue to provide value on it, and it will continue to make money even when you're gone. And for the things that I'm trying to build, like for example, our reselling business, my goal with that is not to be a one-man show, or I mean, me and my wife work together, where it's just two people. My goal with that is to be, hey, I've built this small empire. I want you to be able to take it over, and here are the keys, and just give me X amount of money or give me whatever equity's left. And that's hard to do, in my opinion, when you are the face, when you are the only person. But at the same time, people are not doing business with Business RPG. They're doing business with Sir Isaac. They know and like Sir Isaac. They connected with Sir Isaac. They had a 45-minute conversation where they talked about their card shop with Sir Isaac. That's who they want to do business with. So I can appreciate and understand where you're coming from. I continue to struggle with that. And I very much hope that there's a way to kind of crack that code. And maybe there's someone listening who's bought and sold multiple businesses that way. Please give me a shout. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah. I went through that same thought process because when I started back in like 2021-ish, I kind of like started the Instagram page. It was just actually my logo. And then the first thing that one of my business mentors said was like, at least make your face the profile picture. And I was like, all right, I can do that. Because the whole entire time I was like, I didn't want to become the face of it because I wanted it to become more than me. And I kind of leaned on Nerd Fitness as that kind of
Mm.
example because Nerd Fitness is a really big coaching brand in our space, and Steve Cam is the CEO and the founder and everything of it. But Nerd Fitness and everything like that is just the logo, the profile pictures, and it's not about Steve. It's about the community that he created of nerds, misfits, and mutants, and the coaches, all the coaches underneath him, and stuff like that. And eventually, I was like, I'm gonna have a team working under me, which I mean I do now, and we have a small team, but it's still me as the face. And I kind of had come to the realization that I'm probably not going to be building a coaching business that is going to be, I'm going to exit. It'll always be something that is connected to me and my brand. And if I do become somewhat of a ghost in the machine, fine, but I always will have direct oversight over everything of Phoenix Performance Coaching. And so that wasn't exactly a harsh pill to swallow because it just meant that, success is tied directly to me. And that gives me a little bit more control over it. And so that was kind of my realization or rationale to finally caving in, so to speak, and changing my Instagram handle. Plus, it also didn't help that like out of all the business mentors that I worked with, they all had their name in their Instagram handle and like all their social medias, and it wasn't like their business to the point where when they would send me, like the invoice to get started, it would be such and such slash LLC. Like that's the only time I ever saw that name of like their actual business name. Everything else was just their face and name was the brand. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. So maybe they do have something going there.
Yeah, I partly attribute that to the day of social media and everything that we live in. But if that's how it's going, then that's how it's going.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be kicking in, they'll have to be dragging me along, kicking and screaming, right? I hear you. We're getting close to time and I want to ask you a few more questions. How do you feel about like streaming? Because I feel like streaming is a form of podcasting to where you aren't necessarily one-on-one with a guest, but you are talking to an audience in a long form, very low production value way.
And if you had asked me that question about 2 years ago, I would have said streaming is hard. And it's not that my answer has changed from the fact that it's hard. But my eyes have been opened recently by another platform called Whatnot, where it's just a live auction show where you're just up there, you have a picture, you're selling it. It's like eBay Lite or live version of eBay, which I think eBay has their own version of Whatnot that they put together too. But Whatnot, everything that you do on there is the same thing you would do on a Twitch show, except that you have inventory on a Whatnot. You're still engaging with the chat. You're still talking with people. You're still sometimes playing music or a stream or something. You want something constantly on the screen that is engaging with people. You don't want to have dead air. All the things that go into building a loyal audience of people who are there to watch you live applies to Whatnot, just like it would to Twitch. So I think there is something there, but it takes a lot more energy. It takes a lot of time. There is so much that goes into the post-production of a live stream where, like this conversation with you and me, we can sit down and have a timestamp of this and this happened. And all the mistakes that have happened, I'm assuming the audience won't get to see. You, audience listener, will not get to hear the time that I mispronounced whatever word it was, although there are some of those you might have to leave in because my words are so close together. But for Twitch, once I take all that out, the magic's gone. For Twitch, when I get frustrated for a flub or whichever, that's part of the content. That's part of what people are there to see. I don't know how to leverage Twitch into growing a business, but I do know that as soon as my Whatnot audience hears that I am a podcast producer, the content stops being questions about what's coming up next in the auction. The questions all become, hey, how'd you do that? What does it look like? What shows have you worked on? Can you send me a link? What's your podcast about? Can you do your podcast live on Whatnot? And all these different questions, unsolicited, come out of the woodwork from people who are buying Magic the Gathering cards or video games from me. I think there's something to it. I just want to confess right here now live to everyone my ignorance on the proper application of a platform like Twitch for growing your business. It's got to be there. I just don't know the secret sauce on that one. yet.
Yeah. Right, exactly. From what I have seen, I dabbled in Twitch streaming for a very little bit. It's something that requires probably at minimum 12 to 15 hours a week of commitment to where you have to do it. And like you said earlier on, be very timely. If your schedule is you are going to stream Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. or whatever, then make sure you stream that and you're logging in at exactly 5 p.m. because people are expecting to get home from work and they're going to have their dinner while watching you stream, or they're going to listen to you on their commute home or whatever, but they're going to expect to listen to you between 5 and 8 p.m. And so if you're 5 to 6 p.m. one day and then you don't log in until like 7 p.m. and you do like, maybe you do like a 3 to 5 p.m. stream, it's like that you're so sporadic that people aren't going to actually develop a routine kind of around your Twitch schedule. Kind of like when back in the day, when we had TV shows that were actually on a schedule, we had to, at 7 p.m. we were watching this and stuff like that. And so that's kind of how Twitch streaming, I think, is being viewed as. And along that, I've noticed that Twitch has probably one of the worst discoverability on their platform. And it's like really hard to find new talent, or essentially it's really hard to find your audience on Twitch. And so I know a lot of people will post on like Twitter, Instagram, TikTok with their streams. And so they have to use other platforms to funnel people to Twitch. And that's kind of how I use Twitch. I wanted to use Twitch as a way to essentially use it kind of like an open office hour to where I'm streaming for like 3 or 4 hours, just playing video games, chill, casual games. And I want to have that open and be presentable and approachable to where people can hop in, ask me a couple questions, watch me for 10 minutes and dip out, because then they'll have a much better idea of who I am as a person because they're watching me stream. Like you said, very, very, very low production quality. If I misspeak, if I stutter or stammer, which I do often, it's all in there. They get a feel for my vibe as like a person as close to in real life as possible, right? As close to my authentic self. And that's how I always kind of said that Twitch streaming is kind of like playing video games with your friends in the living room, to where you have to constantly keep them entertained by telling them what's going on in the game, and asking and having a side conversation with them while you're playing. And I think that is a way to kind of help promote your business, because you have to use Twitch to present your brand in a more authentic way. But then you have to use other platforms to funnel people to Twitch. So again, it's like that one piece of the puzzle, very similar to like a long form content or podcast like this.
Yeah, the only thing that comes to mind in response to that is you want to live stream where your target audience is going to be. You and me, we love nerds. We love working with nerds. We love making content with nerds. My clients live on LinkedIn. So when I'm doing production related content, my interests are going to go towards LinkedIn. When I'm making something for the business RPG, I don't have time for Twitch, but Instagram and whatnot, of all places, seems to be the best places for me to talk about it. Go where your audience is going to be is what I would tell someone who's listening to this, who's wanting to leverage live streaming to grow their business, because that's where you're going to see the most results. Has that been your experience, or would you say something else?
Well, I would probably agree with you. I don't have a whole lot of experience exploring all social media platforms because I don't have the time for that, and the mental bandwidth, really. But from what I have been told, Instagram is like the best place to get real people. As far as like Facebook, TikTok, and everything like that, Instagram seems to be the best for like the most high quality leads. And then if you can switch them over to YouTube to warm them up faster, cool, like we talked about earlier. But I definitely understand wanting them to hit them on their native platform, because every single native platform wants you to stay on that platform as long as possible, because your time and attention is the most valuable resource to them. So trying to get people to jump from platform to platform is like just an increased barrier. And so I can totally understand why you would want to try to do everything you can where your audience is and try to keep them on that platform native.
Mm-hmm. Right on.
Cool. We're right at time. I want to ask you one more question. What piece of advice would you give to somebody who is like, you know what, I have this really cool idea. I want to start a WWE podcast where we break down last night's matches or something like that. They have this cool idea where they want to do some form of long form content, but they don't know how to get started. What would you say would be like the biggest actionable piece of advice for that person?
For me, I know that I either have to start doing something or stop talking about something. When it comes to business, it's the same way. If I want to make this change or if I want to start this new venture, I need to sit down, actually map out what it's going to look like and decide what the next couple steps are going to be and number them out 1, 2, 3 that I need to accomplish in order to make it happen, or I need to stop talking about it and fill that space with something else in life that will actually take me towards a goal. If you love WWE and you have the 40 episode ideas that you can jot down on paper, then the next step is going to be identifying show name, equipment, where you're going to post it, what it takes to do podcasting, and then actually following through and doing it. If you're just talking about it and you're not getting anywhere with it, you might really not be putting any value out there in the world right now just by having it on a shelf that you theorize about and reminisce on. It'd be great to do X, Y, Z. At least start X, figure out what Y looks like, and make Z a goal if you're going to have this be part of your life.
Cool. I love it. Do that brainstorming and take action.
Right on.
Perfect. So, like I said, the one and only Sir Isaac Smith. I, again, appreciate you hopping on. I enjoy our chats. I know sometimes we maybe got a little, like you said, highbrow, maybe got a little too in the weeds. But it's my podcast, so we can do what we want. And so how can people get a hold of you? How can people follow you? Give us all the information on how we can best support you.
Sure thing. My handle on Instagram is @businessrpg. All one word, no additional punctuation or other characters to it. If you really want to get a hold of me fast, best way is going to be email. My email is sir.isaac, ISAAC, .smith@gmail.com. You just give me a shout on there, follow through, let's have a chat, answer some questions, maybe get you on my podcast if you feel like you're doing something pretty nerdy in the entrepreneur space. Happy to chat podcasting, reselling, or content.
Nice. Awesome. And then I will also, if you can send me the link, I'll put the link to our episode on your podcast in the description.
Let's do it.
Cool. Well, Sir Isaac, sorry. I appreciate it. And I guess until next time, guys.
Alrighty. It's been fun.